Okay, looks like I'm live. Yes. We. Okay, and I'd like to thank anyone who has managed to show up early right now. And yes, as you can see, I am actually live right now. Whoa. Now what I've decided is I'm going to put a pause on the player characters for just a little bit. What I'm going to do, everyone seemed to like my orc warband, so what if I do a goblin horde? Cue intro. Oh wait, I don't have an intro. Something I gotta work on, huh? So, it's gonna be very simple. I'm gonna make goblins for a while. Not counting my Sunday streams. Sunday will be for Patreon sculpts as usual, or if I run out of patrons, then it's going to be for just, once again filling in that little, the chart. This thing. Yeah. I still need to get around and do that, I guess that would be a dwarf paladin that I did most recently. And hello, Kim. Thank you. I hope it does well. Now, I've got to say that my goblins look more like Games Workshop goblins and not Pathfinder goblins. I don't like football heads. These are long nose, pointy chin, big ears, flappy feet, big hands, and goofy. Not, we're gremlins with mouths wider than our torsos. Ha 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 ha. You know what I mean. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to start off with the Warlock. The spellcaster that, kind of hopped up on shrooms because they give him his magic power, blah. So, this is my base geometry. I've said it before, and apparently there's a lot of people who will skip the beginning of my show. This base geometry I modeled in 3D Studio Max. And then I created morphs. So, for example, a full-blooded goblin looks like this. This is my goblin, my basic unmodified goblin. And I also recently made I also made a hobgoblin, which is for the larger, more human-like, more intimidating beasties. So, what I'm going to do for the Goblin Warlock is I'm going to do it a 50-50 blend. 50% Goblin, 50% Hobgoblin. He's going to be a little bit bigger than the regular goblins, but he's not going to be as large as a full Hobgoblin. So, obviously one thing that he's going to have is he's going to have a robe. So, I load in what I call the robe skirt. And what this does, this is a separate piece, and it will pose and conform with, and as you've just seen, it'll also follow the morphs. So when let's say I wanted to make him, add in some orc, it moves with him. Now, I'm going to, it's right here on the right-hand pane, where it says robe bottom. I'm going to hide that because we don't need it just yet. Now, his right hand is going to have a staff of some kind. So, I'm going to start it off as, well, the same that I used for the orc. The reason there is a ball at the end of the staff is for the sole purpose of having geometry there for me to sculpt and warp and twist. Now his left hand, I'm gonna give him a more just a pokey, not a regular dagger, mind you, a goblin knife, in his left hand. And see, the Goblin knife, well, it's a little large. Let me go ahead and front view frame. This needs to go up and over near the middle of the hand. This is the pivot point for the knife, and I want it to be in the middle of the hand. Okay, now I'm going to make the knife a little bit smaller because that's just a bit too big. So shrink it. Z translate forward just a little bit. Yep. No. Yeah, that's about right. And we're gonna start work making our pose from here. And so the pose we got, the orc shaman was a bit more, how to put it? Well, this is him. You can see the pose that he's in. He's kind of leaning off of his staff and holding onto the sphere that I painted to look like it's, you know, a lightning orb. And he's got these nice icy little fist on top of his staff. Well, I'm going to do a totally different kind of pose. I'm going to make it as goofy and creepy as possible, because that's how I see goblins. Goofy and creepy. So he's almost going to be standing up on the staff with his other hand up with his dagger. Yes, I said standing up on his staff. How are we going to do that? Well, I'm not quite sure. What we're going to start off with, though, is that I've said this in several of my, or in at least 2 special editions, or at least 1 special edition, and several of my regular shows. Oh, while I'm thinking about it, he also needs, it's called a breastplate, but it basically covers up the otherwise massive, you know, massively defined pecs, and we don't need our sorcerer to have pecs. But you should always have the hips be not parallel to the ground or each other in any angle. And the reason for this is it looks more natural. The only time I see anyone whose hips and shoulders are parallel to each other and the ground is when it's a U.S. Marine standing at attention. Well, I guess Army too, but I mean, Army stands for aren't ready for the Marines yet. So, yeah. And apologize to anyone who's Army. I am a former active duty U.S. Marine, so I get to tease y'all. Alright, let's go ahead and twist the forearm. No, let's not do it at the forearm. Let's start it off at the shoulder. Not entirely at the shoulder, though. And then the upper arm. Then we're going to bend the forearm. No, bend it the right way. And then side to side the hand. Then we're going to grab the staff and we're going to Z translate, because the staff's Z is the length of the shaft. Just enough so he's like this. And then we're going to move the feet so that this foot is kind of back on the base of the staff. The reason for this is he's going to be standing on the staff. This foot will also be where most of our actual contact with the base will be coming from. Okay, what we need to do is we now need to pin rotation and translation of this foot so that we can go ahead and go do this so that the leg is bent a bit more wonky. Now we're going to bend this leg forward. Not quite that much. Let's go to about here. And we're going to bend the calf backwards. And we're going to bend the foot forwards. Okay, now I think we need to go ahead and I know what we'll do. I'll grab this and I'll grab the arrows. And then I'm going to just kind of drag the foot down like that. Then side to side it. And pull it back a little. Pull it back a little here. And bend it a bit more. It's those big flappy feet. I need to pin this one now. Pin translation, pin rotation, and bend the thigh out. Yeah. Yeah, there, that's good. And now I'm going to unpin all. What these pins do is it locks things like the feet and the hands so that you can move the other body parts to get a better looking pose. So now, pretty much the only thing left to pose, we need to go ahead and let's slide this a little bit more so that it's, well, first let me do that, hit Control D, so that his feet are what's on the ground. And they're not. Okay, so let's slide this back a bit. Either way. Then we're going to twist this shoulder forward, raise it up, and then raise the arm up, back, and twist it so that we can then bend the dagger. The arm holding the dagger, and twist that, and then side to side the hand so that the dagger's kind of pointing up. And right now this is the pose that our Goblin Warlock is going to have. So now we need to go into the face and do what we can to make that face have an expression that's just as gacky and cackly and goofy. So, sorry, critter. Anyway, from what I understand, it happens with YouTube more than it did with Twitch. But we're going to rotate the brows and make his brows look evil and ugly. Because he is evil. A bit too much. And then open that mouth. Now we're going to bend the head back and tilt it to the side a little. Bend the head back a bit more and bring the neck forward. And now we make the closed parts visible. Get some soda. And I'm feeling weird. I'm going to give him a braid coming from the top of the skull. So what we do, in my content library, I have made a braid. Yes, I made a braid. Where is it? There it is. No, that's the ponytail. Where did I put the braid? Did I put it into clothing? There it is. The braid. It's not going to be that big, but it is going to be kind of big. Let's just scale it down a bit. And then select the first segment, and we're going to bring it up, bring it over, and we're going to rotate it. Then we're going to bring it down a little so that it's coming out of his head. And that still looks a bit too big. So shrink it down. And slide it over. Now we're going to expand all of these. Expand from selected. And 2, 3, and 4 are going to bend backwards. And kind of out to this side. Whereas 5, 6, and 7 are going to bend forwards and to the other side. So that's his braid. Whee. Now I think I need to kind of tilt it back from the base. So X rotate is going to drop a bit. Yeah, that's a bit more appropriate, but it also needs to come over some. There. And there we have the basic pose for our Goblin Warlock. Now we're going to hide the props, the hair, all of the hair, the breastplate, and the robe bottom. The reason for this is because we've got to export them as individual pieces to make it easier to sculpt them together and make them, become one thing. So, you will not get to see the dialog boxes that come up because of the way that the screens are being captured. So that goes to, we're going to call it Gobwar Body. Accept. Now we're going to hide the body and we're going to make the staff and the dagger visible. We're going to call these Gobwar Props. Accept. And we're going to hide those and make the clothing parts visible. And we're going to export this as Gobwar Parts, because we're going to fuse it in before we do most things. Okay, Critter 42 is my brother Danny, so yeah. And I can fully understand what you're saying, TJ Henry. It's just, in the campaign world I usually run, goblins aren't necessarily evil, per se, but they are tribals who follow demon gods and have the intelligence but not the discipline to participate in society. Hobgoblins actually participate in society in some areas, and one of the nations on my campaign world is run by hobgoblins, with goblins as like second-class citizens. It's just that most goblins find it too hard to deal with being civilized and are worse than bandits. It's not so much that they are evil by nature, it's just that most tribal hobgoblins are bandits and prey upon the weak. So yeah. It's the way I get around the always chaotic evil bit that a lot of games have, that I kind of disagree with. If you're not a supernatural entity, you're not always chaotic evil. That's just the way I see it. Anyway, we now switch over to the far more processor-intensive ZBrush. Yay, this is where the sculpting comes in. So I import the body for the goblin. Bing! Yeah. And now, in order to make it a bit more, I gotta append another one, and this is going to be the parts, the clothing parts. Then I append one more, and this is going to be the props. Now, on the clothing parts, I have to come up in here, and before I do anything else, I need to smooth over this part of the chest on the clothing bits, and this part of the robe so that they'll blend easier. Then I'm going to use what's called Move Topological, which only moves things that are directly physically connected. Actually, in this instance, I'm going to use just the regular move, which only applies to this subtool now. And I'm going to move this so that it looks more like it's draping over and coming out from over the feet instead of being, just kind of affecting the feet. Just enough for the foot to be visible in the back. We now need to go to the Move Topological, because we need to pull this down over the knee a little. Yeah. Then we're going to grab this front end and pull it up over the foot, and pull it up and back a little. Now, in the back, we have some shapes we need to fix. We're going to start off by hitting it with a smooth brush, because that will make it, that'll bring them all the pieces closer to each other. And then I gotta grab these in here. Then I'm going to use the Move Topological to bring them all out and kind of drag them out from where they are. This is mostly just mesh repair right now. Then I hit him with the smooth brush again. Smooth over here. And then I'm going to make the mouth a lot larger, so I can drag the whole thing out as one. And then smooth it. Whoop, make it smaller here for this smoothing. Smooth it in order to make it drape a bit better when it comes time to sculpting into drapery. Now, a lot of what's going on below the level of this foot right here will not be on the final figure, because there will be a base that'll slide up and cover that up. Alright, now we're going to hide these. We're going to take the mouth and we're going to shrink the mouth. See, when I first created this geometry, it was not for this purpose. And so the mouth has some flaws. I can fix it later, but right now, but that would involve pretty much redoing almost everything. For right now, I'm just using this smooth brush to bring this mouth in. It still has a yelling look to it, but now it's not going to be as much of a pain to sculpt on. We're also going to use what's called merge down. Always okay. So that now the clothing and him are one piece. Move topological still works, so we're going to grab the bottom back down here. Here, no. There. I'm going to kind of pull it out a bit to cover up that butt. Because, you know, no one wants to see a goblin butt. If you do, I don't want to hear it. Goblins are not exactly sex queens of the universe. If they were, I'd be looking for a different universe. Oh. Alright, now, under geometry, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to subdivide it until it looks smooth. That should do. Then we're going to Dynamesh. Right now, there's a lot of different body parts that are overlapping, fusing together, intersecting. It's not good. What Dynamesh does, and we're increasing the resolution for this, is, for all intents and purposes, it fuses it into a single solid surface. A single, what a lot of 3D printers call, or 3D printing advocates call, a watertight surface. And now, I run it across the seams here, and these seams vanish because, you know, all they are is just sharp corners now. They're not actual seams like they used to be. That includes the seams up here near the chest, where the pecs are being hidden, and over here. And I'm going to do it over here because we don't need a lot of arm definition on something that's going to be wearing baggy sleeves. Same thing goes on this side. And back here. Now let's frame out. Now the next thing we're going to do is going to be to make those sleeves. After I get some soda. Talking makes your mouth dry, you know. You end up sounding like the Godfather. Ah, and thank you. Now before we make these sleeves, what we're going to do, first of all, when I Dynameshed it, it came out to 680,000 polygons. That sounds like a lot, but it's not enough to work on. So I'm going to hit divide, and we now have 2.735 million polygons. Now, use the bracket keys to shrink the mouse, or the cursor, as I grab my Wacom tablet. This thing's awesome. And just because I could, my stylus holder. In brightest day and blackest night. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. The green resin that comes with the Anycubic photon is perfect. Oh, and by the way, if you didn't notice, I am sponsored by Anycubic now, but that has had no influence on the fact that I think that the resolution of their prints are frickin' amazing. I mean, it's easy mode with cheat codes for printing tabletop miniatures. I mean, it's not just me. You can ask pretty much anyone. Anyway. Now we're going to make sleeves. Now I'm going to give him short sleeves that dangle a lot. So the way we're going to handle this is, first things first, we're going to mask off part of the arms. And what this does, there's an option for extraction, and this, when you extract geometry in ZBrush, it makes a copy of that, and it goes both in and out. In other words, it extrudes in and it extrudes out as a single large chunk, and that's what our sleeves are going to be. This will also enable us to make these sleeves and skip over the fact that, as I see it, there's an area here where the leg is intersecting, or not intersecting, but is fusing with the arm. We don't need that. We also don't need the fact that I've got a spot here. You see, it may look like a circle, but the brush for ZBrush is actually a sphere. And so I got a little dot here. We don't need that. Okay, let's make sure I don't get any others anywhere. Frame out. And then I go to Subtool and Extract. And it's got to be kind of thick, so 0.035. Extract. Accept. Now you'll notice that it's got part of itself masked off, the same part that was masked off on the base figure. Well, if we draw in midair with the mask on, it gets rid of that. Problem is, right now, he's still masked, so if I want to do anything else later, I have to do that to get rid of it. Now, we are going to work on the sleeves here. We go back to geometry, and we're going to Dynamesh it, but at 256. Not as high of a resolution as we did the base. We hit Dynamesh, and it's down to 922. Now, I'm going to place the mouse on the edge here and go up with the cursor until it's about there. Now, I'm going to hit smooth, because this will enable me make it easier for me to make it small enough at the shoulder area to bring it in. And now I'm just going to kind of grab it and bring it in towards the body, so that later on when we fuse all of our clothing bits, it's very clearly, going to be the sleeve. And it's going to be easier for it to fuse in. So we have, that sleeve is not done, but it's ready. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to grab the bottom of this, and we're going to pull it out, because we want this to be kind of a wizardly sleeve, and they're kind of long and baggy and saggy, and to be exact, the kind of sleeve that you see most often is from what's called a houppelande, which is actually kind of a late medieval cut tunic or surcoat. And it was, yes, it did end up being mostly worn by women, but it was also worn by men, usually of the scholarly type. Thus the wizardly robe having the long, dangly sleeves. Okay, now grab the top of the sleeve, drag it in, grab that, drag it in, drag it in, drag it in. We're not dragging our feet, that's for sure. We already did that bit. Okay. Now, as with the other sleeve, we've got to kind of blend it out, but this time it's going out at an angle because it's draping and laying against the leg here. So we're going to have it actually a bit more a bit thinner, but it's also, like I said, it's draping against the leg. And then we kind of pull this out just a bit. We're going to pull it down. Okay. And then we're going to pull this like that. Okay, now we frame out, and we can see where those sleeves are. Now, here comes the big thing. Breastplate, tabard, or just chest. Because, I mean, with the breastplate, he could also be an assassin, but why he would have a staff, I don't know. Tabard could, you've got the problem that it'll start looking like the orc did. And just a robe, well, it's kind of simple, but I guess we can add in some detailing on it later. Well, while we're making that decision, let's go ahead and subdivide this a couple more times to make it roughly as smooth as the rest of the figure. Delete lower. We're not going to fuse it in yet. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going ahead and we're going to make the belt. And the belt's going to be kind of easy because all we got to do is change this angle and select, using the mask, the belly. Then we're going to make the mouse a little bit bigger and draw on a big old disc in the center where we're going to end up putting our belt buckle. Okay. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to extract this at 0.025. It would be 0.03 on a human-sized, 0.02 on a human-sized figure, but that's going to be too small because he's slightly smaller, so 0.025. Accept, draw, and now I draw again to erase what I just masked, and I'm going to Dynamesh this at 256. Unlike what I did with the sleeves, the belt here needs a little bit of work because it needs to be a bit more rounded. You see, it moves in the direction of the vertex normals. In some of you, and I know my brother knows what that is. I know Danny knows. But basically, if this was a three-dimensional object, the normals is the direction that would be exactly perpendicular to a face or vertex. You know, it's like, case in point, the normals for the face that or the vertex that the mouse is sitting on right now would come out in this, well, in this direction, away from the surface, whereas the ones up here come out, well, you can't see that because I'm covering it up with the camera. Ones up on top instead would be going up from the belt. Now the end result is this area here got pinched. So we're going to use slash. Not a very strong slash, but we're going to use slash. Where is it? There it is. See add. We're going to open up the stroke submenu and turn off lazy mouse and decrease the strength to about 7. Shrink the mouse a bit. We're going to kind of pull it back along here to try and change where the angle is on this thing. Then we're going to shrink the mouse a little and flatten out that area. It's still going to be thinner, but it's not going to look like it folded in half on the model. Okay, and that's going to be our basic, where we're going to be working on our belt buckle, but so we don't need to worry about that now except to subdivide it to look smooth. And delete lower. Now, then we got to go back up here. Actually, let's move this down in the list. We're going back up here. Frame, let's make the belt invisible for right now. So do we want a tabard, a belt, a tabard, breastplate, or just the robe? Okay. Now, fortunately, I say fortunately, I hit Control and Shift and click. I can hide parts. Now, dagnabbit. I've got to do it the old-fashioned way, and the old-fashioned way won't work. Okay, so visibility. I need to select most of the braid and hide point. No. Show point. No. Oh, I know. Go to masking first and invert. Then hide point. Yeah, there we go. I've got that hidden. Now what we're gonna do for the tabard. Oh, let me go ahead and make the mouse a lot larger and to smooth out this area here. It's one thing that it's going to be wrinkled over, but it's another that okay. Go ahead and inflate there, because that's going to be a problem. Okay, anyway, frame out. We're going to first start off on the back. And his tabard's going to be kind of loose because he stole it from somebody. I mean, he's a goblin. He's a bandit. And it's going to be kind of wonky at first until we get it fully out and fully worked on. This is also going to let us not have to worry about making a collar for the robe, because its own collar would be hiding the robe's collar. Now, and before I do anything else, let me make sure I have not accidentally masked off part of the ear and it doesn't look like it. Not quite so severely. Much of it will be hidden by the belt. Now I'm going to unmask, to give it kind of a sharp bottom. Then I'm zooming in, and I'm going to shrink the mouse a little bit just to kind of blend in some of these areas here. and smooth up this. Also, looking at it, I'm pretty sure it would not hang on here, and instead would bunch up into a bunch of wrinkles over here. And then, yes, I'm kind of muttering to myself here. Okay. Now, we go back to Subtool, and just like we did before, this is going to be a 0.03 extract. Accept. Draw. Draw. Now we're going to hide. Oh no, let's do one thing first. Let's bring back the braid. This side, don't forget about it. Now we're going to hide the body and the sleeves. And we're going to work entirely with the tabard for this shoulder area, because otherwise it's not going to be accessible. So first thing is we dynamesh at 256. And then we're going to smooth this area right here. And using slash, we're going to draw a new border for it. And hit 1 to repeat. And okay. Now, when we make the guy visible again, you're going to switch to move topological and make it a lot bigger and kind of pull it back in under where we're going to make our buckle. And kind of pull it like that. We're going to be using wrinkles later, and I'm going to be showing you why we're and why we're using what wrinkles, but for right now it's just grab that area here and pull it in to make it underneath the belt, because you always put your belt under your tabard. Your tabard is tucked in. It keeps it from like flapping in your face and stuff. Yeah. That's why they did it. Yeah, because you know, when you're trying to ride your horse and swing your sword and stuff, having this tabard flapping in your face is nuts. Okay. We're gonna make it a little bit bigger, and we're gonna pull this side out. We're gonna do it just carefully because we don't want the innermost geometry to come out. Just enough so that it's not. I'm going to smooth it because we don't want it to be as affected by that. Then, down here at the bottom, we're bringing it big again. We're going to grab and we're going to pull it out. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and out. And then we're going to grab this bottom and kind of pull it back in and under so that it's, you know, it's curling up a little bit more than the rest of the robe is. Okay. We're going to do something similar over here. I'm going to change how I'm doing it, though, by changing the focal shift. And pulling it out. And pulling it out. Okay. So for right now, Right now, this is our Warlock. He's already looking a lot more Warlocky than he used to. Wouldn't you say? And I can already see that when I do this, it's harder for you it slows down on YouTube a lot more for when I do that than when it does on Twitch. Okay. But yeah, that's just what I got so far. And that's after, not just barely over 50 minutes of sculpting. And that's not even counting the time that I was just shooting the breeze on broadcast. So, the next thing we're going to do, we need to subdivide this a couple times. To make it as smooth as it needs to be. And then I'm going to go ahead and hide. Well, let's move this down. I don't think I need to add any other clothing bits, so I'm going to hide all of the other clothing bits except for those sleeves. Merge down. And then we're going to Dynamesh again. And now we can fuse those sleeves on. So I've gotten people asking me, do I use the mouse or my tablet more? Or why do I use one and not the other? The best metaphor I've heard is, imagine that the mouse is like a rattle can of spray paint. You push the button, you get full force. No control. But sometimes you want to make sure you have full force all the time. With the tablet, it's more like an airbrush, where you can adjust the strength by adjusting the pressure. So, there. Oi! It would pull the bottom of the tabard down, Todd, except he's kind of jumping and hopping around, so it's to follow the flow of motion. It's he's not standing static. He's intended to be in motion, so it's flopping and flowing around. I mean, if I grabbed a piece of cloth and was bouncing around, even when I stopped for a second there, it would be swinging back and forth. You don't always want to do things exactly like they would be in reality when doing a miniature. You want to, it's more like impressionistic painting in some ways. So I'm going to go ahead and, I mentioned the belt buckle, let's go ahead and take care of that. And what we're going to do, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to mask off the center of it. Then I'm going back down here to where it says masking, and I'm inverting the mask. I'm then using deformation, and I'm going to use offset by Z. And I'm going to pull it out. Not that much, but about that much. And then, no, not offset by Z. We're going to use inflate. Actually, before I do that, masking, I'm going to give it one level of blur. Okay, now deformation, we're going to inflate it out. Just a little bit. Yeah. Just enough to give us another layer. And then I'm going to use slash, subtract, And I'm going to sharpen where it meets the belt. It's intended to look crude, not finished, but it is a little bit more noisy and erratic than I would have totally preferred, so I'm going to get Control Z. The intent is that this is either a layer of metal or a second layer of leather upon which his clan or god's symbol will be inscribed. In Warhammer, the most common kind of symbol that goblins would have would be a crescent moon. The problem is that that doesn't really fit, not as I see them. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it crossbones. Old style crossbones. And another one up here. And down here. Then I'm going to use the slash again to exaggerate the space between them. Space between. Yeah. And then going back up here to geometry, I've got to dynamesh it at 768 after dividing it one more time. Okay, then I'm coming in here and very gently, very lightly smoothing out where it meets. And then so that it doesn't have any real sharp lines here. It's bones, after all. Then back to slash. And once again, digging in deep beside and between the two bones, and in fact, a little bit here and here. Kind of emphasize that it's crossbones. Now, that's a bit of a small detail when you actually think about the size of the print. Printing it on FDM may or may not show that little detail. But whether it does or not, it's there, and it will show on a resin print. Now I'm going to go ahead and hide the belt. The belt really doesn't need any more sculpting, and I'm going to start sculpting wrinkles. Actually, we don't need to hide the belt. Have fun, Danny. I can understand that, TJ Henry. It's just, it is based on the old Warhammer goblins. It's not as cartoony. The Warhammer goblins, they had a similar face to what I've got here, but they also, you never really saw their arms and legs and torso. All you saw was a robe and big hands and big feet and big head. This is a little bit more dynamic, not quite as cartoony, but still not quite, it's still a bit misproportionate. Okay, now we're going to add wrinkles. Now the first wrinkles we're going to add are down here on the bottom, we're not up here, coming up from where the belt is poking in. And for that, we're making the mouse bigger. We're going back up to stroke and turning off lazy mouse. and lowering the intensity. We're going to then draw on. Oh, no. See, come out from here. These wrinkles. See, there's multiple different kinds of wrinkles. Different reasons for wrinkles. Pressure, bending, hanging. And we're going to be doing pretty much all three of them on this tabard. Now we're going back to slash, and we're going to slash in the middle of each of these wrinkles we just drew on here. And then smooth out the tops of them a lot, and the bottoms of them just a little. We then go to add, and we're going to drop it down a lot and shrink it. And we're going to take the bottom arc of these wrinkles and emphasize them. Because wrinkles form sharply, not smoothly. And then we're going to give it just one quick brush over. Then we're going on to the back. And we're going to do something similar here. Standard. And then we're going to come up and go up along here. And then smooth it. 2, 3, 4. Then we're going to kind of emphasize the bottoms of these wrinkles a little bit more. Because that's where the cloth is being compressed by the belt. Back to 14 and subtract, and then we're going to draw in these lines down the middle of the wrinkles that emphasize the contraction aspect of these wrinkles. And then go to add, go down to back down to 8, and the bottom of the wrinkles gets attacked and made more strong. That which does not smooth us makes us stronger. Okay. And that's those compression wrinkles. But now we've got wrinkles coming out from this shoulder because of how it's compressed. But it's a different kind of it's compression from bending. Trying to get this here. So what we need to do is make this smaller and a little bit stronger. And we're going to come out just 2 of them from the actual site. And we're going to end up cutting in between them there. The reason there's only 2 is because only 2 can fit from the actual path that we're wanting. We're going to be adding more as time goes on. And then I'm going to go ahead and hide our body just so I can work on up here a bit more directly without having that ear in the way. Alright. We're going to subtract the space between them. And then, yeah, there we go. Now we're going back to standard. We're going to draw in another wrinkle that comes down this way and smooth it, smooth the ends of the wrinkles. Wrinkles end Wrinkles fade out, they don't burn up. So the Kurgan doesn't like wrinkles. And kind of coming down like that, and down like that. We're also going to now, once we've done this, and come down from here, we're going to make our, oh no, we're going to make it a bit bigger. So we're going to come down each one of these and bring them out and down, because that's how they form. They get bigger as they go down. Going down. Technically they get wider and softer, but it's easier to say bigger. Okay, and then we're going to smooth this just to make it a bit smoother. Then we're going back to slash, but we're doing it slightly different. We're going to start with add. We're going to go just ever so slightly sharpen these wrinkles. And down, and down, and down. And basically the idea is that these wrinkles are coming from the bend, both the bend of the shoulder and from hanging from the other, from that shoulder. Then we're going to sub a little bit stronger, and we're going to go very slightly underneath. Oh, too strong. We're going to go very slightly underneath each of these wrinkles, because wrinkles respond to gravity. And only on the ones that are starting to angle out. Okay. That's frame. You can already see it starting to look like baggy cloth, at least, you know, kind of cover it up. Now the other shoulder isn't quite as wrinkly. It's not going to have as much of a build-up there, but it's still going to have a couple of hang-ups. Just a couple, lighter, not as intense. Whoop. In fact, it's actually going to come down and start to come up that way. Especially over here. Rather, especially over here where it's got a shoulder blade. No, it doesn't look right. It's got to come down. Okay, then we're going back to slash. And very lightly come up and just sharpen the tops of them. We're not going to bother with underscoring the bottoms, because these don't really need it. And don't forget to blend the ends. So the upper torso of the tabard is done, and now it's going to be time for the bottom of the tabard. Well, I can almost see the pose being so acrobatic, but by the same token, at least in most of the campaigns I run, goblins are basically smaller, nimbler slaves to orcs. And very often, if they're not their own tribe or part of a hobgoblin tribe. And even then, they're smaller, nimbler hobgoblins. Okay, just in case, I am pulling up a Google image search that I'm going to use this hanging banner just to double check on how to do the draping. It's always good to pull up reference material if you're not certain. If you're not certain how it would look. So for example, what we'd have here, because of the presence of the belt buckle, we're going to have slightly not quite normal, but we're going to standard brush, and I'm going to increase this just a bit because we want this to be, yeah. Now what would happen is you'd have a wrinkle coming up and coming down, a wrinkle coming down, and then we're going to smooth the tops of these wrinkles because that's how it goes. And then we're going to start off a lot lighter and then come down there and blending it in, and then we're going to smooth them all in. That is mostly basic shaping more than anything else. Then, once we've got this kind of smoothed out and a little bit less erratic, we're going to go to slash. We're going to shrink it because I had enlarged it, and then we're going to come in and slash on the bottom third of all of these wrinkles. And we're going to go slightly longer than the wrinkles in some instances. Then subtract, and I'm going to go underneath just the center parts of these wrinkles. Now, not only do wrinkles tend to be sharp, but by making sure we do this with our wrinkles, we're also making it easy. We're also making it somewhat easier to paint, because whether the person who prints this uses dry brushing or washes, the sharper top from the bottoms of the wrinkles catch a wash. And there, that's the back. No, it's the front rather, and now we go back to the back. And that's a standard to make the basic shape. Actually, one thing we can do, and it's something that I don't normally do and I really should, we open up this brush menu and we give it a gravity strength. Now if I do it like 100, it actually will cause some serious problems if I don't have it oriented exactly right. So what we're going to do is we're going to make that gravity strength about 45 and then tilt it down. And we're going to start off with one coming up like that, coming down like that, and then we're going to make it a little bit bigger. And a lot bigger. Then I'm going to turn the gravity strength off because it's not really great for everything. And shrink the mouse, smooth the tops of these wrinkles. The intent behind the gravity strength was to not have to smooth the tops, but it still had to be done. Then we go back to /add and kind of hang our wrinkles. Once again at the bottom third or so of each wrinkle. If it's in the middle, almost vertical, don't worry about it. Just kind of go with the flow. There we go. Now, let's go ahead and make the body visible. And you can see it's looking really nice in terms of actually hanging like a tabard. Oh! Now, next thing we're going to do is we're going to start adding in the wrinkles for the robe, because that's what needs it. And we're going to have the belt and the tabard visible. We're going to start off with the compression wrinkles on the robe from the belt, just like we did on the tabard. We're going to make the mouse smaller because we don't want them as large as those hangy wrinkles. Want them about that big. Okay. No, one more. Yeah. It's going to be a slightly heavier fabric. Heavier fabric has larger wrinkles. So, we're going to do it backwards. We're going to come down and end here and make it big and come back up a little bit. And then smooth it. Whoop. And smooth it. Always smooth the ends of your wrinkles, except for this situation. And come down to about there. And because wrinkles fade away. I'm gonna smooth that one just a little because that went out too far. And then this one is just going to be just a couple bumps coming out. And smooth it. Go up. And smooth it. And then come over here and go up. And smooth it. And go back to add. And loop around the bottom of the wrinkle. In this case, since it's slightly more, yeah, and then loop around the bottom of the wrinkle, and then smooth it just a little, just to get rid of the fact that I've got the edge overlapping itself there. And then kind of smooth it a little just to make it not stick out so much. And here, all we're going to do is we're going to dig in pretty far and then smooth it, because that's the way things are. Whoop. Okay. Then we're going to add some hangy wrinkles from the shoulder. And again, this is a heavier cloth, so it's going to start off not quite that big. Just a couple wrinkles is all that's really needed, especially for this size of a garment. And then we're going to add in just some zigzag wrinkles on the sleeve. We're going to dig into those with the slash tool here in just a minute, but not on them, but in between them. Okay, now we're going to draw on our sharpening. Actually, we need to drop that down to 9. Draw on the sharpening. And here. And then Alt under. Sharpen it here and Alt under. And then kind of just draw on a little bit of sharpiness. Then we're going to use subtract. We're going to go in between these wrinkles and make it a zigzag. Because wrinkles tend to do that. They'll form where they darn well want to. And if you don't like where they're forming, oh well. And that's the... Now we need to make the other sleeve. Go back to standard. And get some soda! And while I'm getting some soda, peek back into chat. And... oh well. But yeah, we've got about we've got 2 more things to do after I finish the wrinkles on the robe. I've got to detail the hands. That means adding knuckles and the tendons on the back of the hand. And then I've got to detail that staff. So, let's go back up here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually draw on a zigzag. And what's going to happen is this is coming down, this is coming up, but it ends up here. These are fusing down here. And this one's coming down, and then they're getting another one up from here. It's actually a lot easier to do these zigzag wrinkles. Well, not so. It's actually a lot easier to do these zigzag wrinkles than it is the hangy ones or the ones from compression. Because you don't have as many parts to them. Okay. No, not sideways. And now all that's left for the robe is the leg parts. And actually, before I do the leg parts, I need to load in our base. So I'm going to append Polymesh 3D. And for all of these goblins, I'm going to give them exactly the same base. And it's going to be the rocky base. Now, I need to lower it because that's obviously way too high. So offset by Y. Offset first until we have most of the foot is visible. And that's good. Now, so with our base, this is currently the state of our goblin. So the next thing we're going to do is go back to our body, which is where we are actually working. And we're actually going to pull up some of the robe parts with our Move topological. Turn on transparency so we can see where they are and pull them. Oh, not large enough. I forgot I've got this focal shift at 48. I'm going to kind of drag these up to where they're able to see just a bit over the rocks. Yeah, there we go. Let's turn off the transparency and drag this one down just a little. There we go. We also need to kind of do it over the staff, so let's grab this and pull that way. Okay. Now it's time to do the wrinkles for the lower part of the robes. And they're going to be a little bit more complex than usual. I want it to be loose, but still kind of pointing out that it is hanging off of that thigh, especially. So what we're going to do, I'm going to start off with a slash, a large, shallow slash, right about here. And I'm going to hit 1 just to emphasize it. Then we're going back to our standard, making it a little bit smaller. We're going to bring this down this way and then down to here. Up, up. Most of the wrinkles here are going to be pretty much just following that. And then also one kind of from here. But the ones here are going to be following mostly this little zigzag. The zigzag is going to be focused on one side, while the rest is going to be mostly hanging. And then we get our slash, and we're going to add, and then we're going to, once again, just sharpen the tops of these wrinkles. These aren't so much wrinkles as full-on folds. So and kind of smooth those out. And I'm going to smooth out the top of this one. And get underside. Actually, what I really need to do over here is I need to shrink and increase the intensity. The smaller it is, for some reason, the stronger you need to make the intensity to have the same reaction. And then smooth all this, just because all we're doing that for is just to kind of get the impression of what's going on there. Okay. And now over here. Let's make it bigger once again. Zig, zag, zug. Zig, zag. And then dig in and under. And then smooth it just a little bit. And then frame. There we go. That's the robe. And it's looking pretty roby. Yay! Actually, I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to give him a couple bangles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this part of the arm. and then deselect, well, deselect a lot of it. Then I'm going to extract, but unlike normal, I'm turning off double-sided. What this does is instead of going out and in, it's only going out. And when I hit extract, accept, draw. Now I'm going to go to geometry and dynamesh it at 128. I'm going to subdivide it one time, and then go to deformation and polish. 5. 5. Steps of 5 until it looks like rounded bangles. There we go. It's a bit more shamanistic there. Now, I'm going to go ahead and take care of his hands, because really and truly he needs the hands. Actually, let's subdivide. Yeah, he's got those nice bangles. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to make the mouse large enough to be... It's going to be about a 16 is what we're going to need. And we're going to inflate. And we are going to inflate our knuckles. Because, like goblins, goblins, like orcs and dwarves, have big old knobbly knuckles. And we're going to draw on the tendons that these fingers follow, and smooth the ends. Always smooth the ends. They fade away like shadows into the night. Then we look to where the... Okay. We're going to need to move the fingers out just a bit, because it's smoothing into the staff. Yeah, there we go. And out just a bit. Okay. Now, we go back to inflate. And we shrink back down to 16. And we're going to mark off the fact that the knuckles will be here and here. I'm using the size of the initial finger, the index finger, to determine that. The middle finger slightly longer, ring is the same as the index, and the pinky slightly smaller. I'm pretty sure most of you knew that. Then I'm going in, and from behind I am inflating the thumb, because that part of the thumb always bends hollow for some reason. So by inflating it, I'm fusing it together. Now I'm going to smooth each part of each finger like this, because what this does, this allows those knuckles we just drew on, combined with this smoothing, flattens out each segment of the finger so that they don't look like Vienna sausages. Now this does blend them together, so I now go back in with slash and a Z sub of 14 and draw in the gap between the fingers. And if you have to make an error of judgment, always try to make it so that the middle finger is thicker and the pinky finger is smaller. Okay, and that's that hand. No, it's not. But we'll get back to that because we'd have to change mouse size, and we don't want to do that right now. So we're going to... We're going to this hand. Now, the reason why it suddenly went off the screen is because ZBrush decides that the center of rotation is wherever you last marked, even if you start moving the camera. So, smoothing out the back, inflating inside this thumb, and here. Okay. Now, looking at the index finger, that means that we'd need a knuckle here and a knuckle here. And now we smooth out the knuckles and straighten them out. There are occasions you don't have to do this, but it usually has to do with either elves or female figures, those type of characters that would have smooth hands, that have their hands already flat. Even with a female or elven character, you will have to do this if they have their hands bent around something, because it will make them look like silly putty. And we don't want Vienna sausage fingers even on an elf. Because Vienna sausage fingers don't look good on anyone except a man made out of Vienna sausages. And that's someone that we don't want to have any other kind of fingers, because that would look weird. Then again, a man made out of Vienna sausages would look weird, wouldn't he? Okay. Oh, give me just a second here. Goblins have fingernails, however, the problem is that at this scale, even a resin printer is not going to show fingernails. So I'm going to take the inflate tool, I'm going to make the mouse bigger now. And I'm going to very gently draw on, well, actually let me lower the intensity. And we're going to inflate the base of the thumb and the heel of the hand. And we're going to do the same thing with the hand that's holding the staff. We're going to inflate the base of the thumb and the heel of the hand. Now we're going to frame out. Yeah. And it's all looking good. Now the last thing that we need to do is stylize that staff. Well, actually, one thing, while I'm thinking about it, we also need to subdivide the base at least once. Now, that staff, we need to subdivide it a few times. And we need to figure out what we're going to do with the head of the staff. And I'm thinking that what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and grab what's called the snake hook. And I'm going to make it big. And I'm going to grab and drag around. Well, let's make this one come from over here. And then grab up here and kind of drag it like that. Then we're going back to a regular inflate, shrink it down, Z-sub, and deflate the sides. It's going to be kind of abstract for a bit. And then smooth out this area. Okay, I need to move that top part. So, make this bigger. And kind of move it back. Okay. Now, we are going to Dynamesh. We're just going to subdivide a couple times. I'm going to Dynamesh it at 256. Okay. Now what we're going back up here, we're going to shrink this down a bit. And we're going to go to our skull insert. And just to make sure, we're opening up the brush. And we want to change the depth to 15. I'm going to grab here and drag on a skull that's going to be pointing down towards the shaft. That looks good. And then from here we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to drag down a skull that's pointing down the shaft. This way, all of the skulls that are used as decorations will have the same style as each other. Now the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to use the move brush. Make it bigger. And I'm going to kind of grab and bend the staff just a little in certain ways, because doesn't need to be an exactly perfectly straight piece of wood that is found by a goblin. Although we want it kind of straight up near the... Actually, let's shrink this the move down. Kind of pull it out a little there, pull it down a little here, but at the same time back up. And then I'm going to take the inflate brush, zoom out, make it bigger, and reduce the intensity, because I'm going to randomly kind of just kind of make it a little bit thicker in places, just because it's not a human-made masterwork staff. It's just weird. Okay, so here we have our goblin shaman. The last thing we need to do now is we need to blend it all down. So we need to go to merge, and we're going to merge down until we have only one subtool left. And it's 1.5 million polygons. Now this 1.5 million, I don't care what kind of system you have, this is going to be a pain to slice. So we need to reduce that polygon count. We also need to make it a single manifold surface. Some of you may remember that back over here on the back of the knee, there was a section that I kind of fused together right up in here. We need to go back there and make sure that I've closed it down again. So we're going to swell it. Okay. And now we're going to close it all back up by dynameshing at 768 again. It's now still at 1.5 million, but oh, it's still going. It's still calculating. Yeah, 1.5 million, but it's all fused together now. It's all one piece. I zoom in. No, it's not. Not yet. All right, Dynamesh. Oh, there's a mask on it. Unmask. Dynamesh. And processing mesh faces. I'd forgotten about the mask on the wrist from 1.845 million. Okay, frame out. Now we need to do something in order to make it printable. It's now, well, technically printable, but nobody's slicer will like it very much. So we go to Z plugin, which it didn't click. Okay, Z plugin. There we go. And Decimation Master. We're going to go ahead and try for 100,000 triangles. And in order of magnitude less. And let's hope it processes properly this time. Sometimes I've been having problems with it. Click. Analyzing mesh, and then it'll start having a percentage. My camera is hiding it so you can't see it, but it'll be an orange line up here. And hopefully it goes all the way across. And if that does it, that means that it processed without a problem. And oh yeah, reordering. And let's see, it's going from 1.871 million polygons to 100,061. Yay! And this is the final geometry. It looks indistinguishable from what we just did, but it's a tremendously less polygon count. So I'm going to export this to our broadcast miniatures, and this is simply going to be Goblin Warlock figure. Now, just to remind everyone, looking at this final result, this is what it used to look like. This looks like an actor in rehearsal. This looks like him on stage for the final result. You know what I mean? This is Daz Studio. Basically, what it is I created the base geometry, both for the figure and everything he's wearing and holding, in 3D Studio Max. But 3D Studio Max has problems with... It's not as easy for me to rig. It's not as easy for me to deal with what are called blend shapes. This blend shape, he's part goblin, part hobgoblin. So that's a human. Dwarf. Deep One. Dragonborn. Kobold. Halfling. Etc. Yeah, those are called blend shapes, and what they are is they don't just change the geometry and the shape of the mesh, because they also move the joint center, so that when you shrink down to a goblin, the shoulders aren't still up here, so that when you bend the arm goes bee. No, it moves the joint center so it works properly. It's just a lot easier for me to put that into a figure that's got Daz Studio handles moving the joint centers along with the geometry when you turn that dial. I've actually got a show early in, I think it's episode 2 or 3, where I make the troll blend shape that shows how that happens. But anyway, what I will do is I will pose the figure and load in the raw geometry of the props and things in Daz Studio, and then export it in sections, like the base figure, his props, his clothing, into ZBrush, and then get to sculpting. Well, anyway, that is that. It is less than 2 hours, and I've finished the Goblin Warlock. Excuse me for the hiccups. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to answer a few questions if you want. And then I'm probably going to go ahead and sign out so that I can... Alright, ZBrush exports in OBJ format. There is an option in there for exporting to STL, but it screws up the scaling. So I use a different program. I load in the finished file and just re-export as STL. So I got to do that. I'm going to do a render of just the basic figure in a green. And by that I mean tabletop miniatures, when they were sculpted physically, were sculpted out of an epoxy putty. It used to be milliput was the big thing, and then somebody discovered a two-part epoxy putty plumbers used called Kneadatite, and it's green stuff. So you probably knew that. I mean, it's if you go to almost any game company site that makes miniatures, they'll show pictures of their greens. So when I would do my when I do these figures, I'll do their basic renders as a green. It's a material I whipped up that kind of looks like fully mixed green stuff. Like this was Tuesday's sculpt, the Dark Elf Polearm Master. Anyway, does anybody have any questions? I don't know about you, but on the Photon, he came out brilliantly. Let me go ahead and zoom in, turn focus in. He came out gorgeous. And this part here came out like super sharp. There's a bit of dust on the back end. Yeah. Anyway, now I've got a print going right now. Otherwise, I'd be printing out this one. Now, the thing is, I've recently switched resins. That gray is the Monocular Rapid gray. I've switched to the Wanhao gray. It's more opaque, but it's also darker. So I'm having a little bit of issues because being more opaque and darker, it takes more UV to cure than that gray does. But I've got a print going. It's mostly a test print to make sure that it's actually printing right, because I had a failure yesterday trying to make a golem with my first print with a new resin is a golem, size large, had to be hollowed out, the whole 9 yards. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and I have a CR10, and just to show, once again, I pull up the camera controls. This sucker was printed on my CR10 on an FDM printer, and it came out like that. It is possible to get really good prints on FDM. Now, if this camera was any better, you could see that there are areas that have significant layer lines, even through multiple layers of paint. But still, yeah, that was printed in PLA. As it stands, since I now have both a resin printer, this guy right here, and a CR10. I'm pretty much using the CR10 for terrain and for usable prints, whereas the Photons is in another room on literally the opposite corner of the house from me right now, is for the miniatures and detailed prints. Now, my current favorite usable prints right now, my paint holders. These are the Army Painter paints. That's an Army Painter mega set with a few extra paints I've also had from various other brands. But it's just right there. So I can be sitting right here, have a tray table set up, be doing my paints. By the way, this is how I hold my figures. I use, well, I've got white, but it's blue tack for all intents and purposes on top. And I stick the figure on that. I'll prime it. You can see the gray spray paint around the top here. And then I'll paint it. Because this lets me, number one, get a better grip on the figure without actually leaving behind any fingerprints. And number two, when I go to paint, I'm going to use my stylus. I can ram my hand against it so that I have less vibration. And the only movement, I could be doing this, and it would still, the only movement will be the brush that I choose. My hand won't be, doing that. A lot more stable that way. There's several different things you can do. I just use those apple barrel paints because I've had them. And there's some old dead ones because my mother used to paint angels for Halloween or for Christmas ornaments. Halloween is better than Christmas, fight me. Anyway, but it's the right size to get a nice firm grip on, tall enough that I can grab it with my whole hand and still have room to paint on top of. Yeah, see, I've been painting tabletop miniatures since at least 1984. I had about a 15-year gap between 2003 and this year. So I'm just now recovering my painting skills. The best demonstration of this is the miniature some of you may or may not have downloaded and printed. It's the one called Valendar the Red, with the Grossmesser in one hand and a kind of dragony Celtic-style short sword in the other. These are those figures. Now to show you just how much difference there is, once again I'm gonna pull up the focus. This was printed FDM and was painted with apple barrel paints when I first started getting back into painting. You can see the lines at the bottom of the tabard and the bulbous bit right here on the sword blade. But yeah, this is the version that I had from the CR10. And then when I painted last week on the printed on the Photon and painted last week with Army Painter paints. Let's look on that face. Compared to this. Just a couple of months of practice have restored that much painting. the best way to get better at painting is to paint more. And like I said, I've got about 60 or 70 miniatures on my shelf here. I'm going to be clearing out a lot of my older stuff and making secondary shelves because I'm going to have a lot of miniatures by the end of the year. So the idea is I print out 2 copies of each. One to show what it looks like straight off the printer, one to show what it looks like painted. At least I don't have an entire army. However, when I get done with this goblin horde, and I've got that orc warband, theoretically I could use those STLs to print enough orcs and goblins to make an entire orc and goblin army, although I'd probably need to get some boar riders and wolf riders. But I mean, I've got archers, spearmen, swordsmen, sergeants, boss orc, spellcasters, and then the goblins, I'm going to have all sorts of weird goblins types. So, yeah. I drink so much more soda while I'm broadcasting than not. So anyway, alright, so Kim, I'm probably going to be on Twitch instead of YouTube when we do your sculpt, simply because I've had problems with YouTube slowing down and going from this resolution to that resolution, blurring it all out. I will have the link in the Discord. If you're unfamiliar, I've got the link to the Discord right straight down here. And if you're not already subscribed, you know, you got the button right down here and the bell icon and the whole 9 yards, blah, blah, blah. So don't forget. Anyway, it is now 10:05 locally. That's Memphis, Tennessee. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to hold up my hand. And because of the way YouTube handles lag, I'm not exactly certain how much time there is between now and when I log out. So I'm going to be counting from 5 to 1. When I see myself have only one finger sticking up and it's not waggling, I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye and end the broadcast. So that's going to be... Well, let me do this. I have a little bit more room for the hand. Okay. That's going to be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Aha! Good night.